Can you guys think of two vehicles that auto manufacturers created and then discontinued because of images that they didn't want tainted in their manufacturing line? I can think of two right off the bat, and it's from people that I've talked to recently and over the last few years, I should say, in the history of automakers, where they have suppressed certain models of vehicles from exceeding because they didn't want their iconic looking car to, what would you call it, be the image of it be tainted. One of them would be the Mustang. We know the Mustang has been around forever. It's been Ford's iconic muscle car. But can you think of any car that performed better, that made the same, if not better, horsepower and had more potential? I know right off the bat the Thunderbird did. The Thunderbird was the first Panther style, whatever, in that class of car that came with independent rear suspension. It came with a nice gear setup. They had the Super Coupe. It was a turbo option. The car did very, very well. And if you remember the late 80s, early 90s, even talking to my boss, he's got a Super Coupe. It's a supercharged 3.8 liter. And it's a very fun, very good looking, muscular, sleek car for that era, right? Well, talking to him and kind of learning some of the history on the Thunderbird, you see that that was around the same time and era where BMW and Ford were in bed together. So you had the independent rear suspension, you had different suspension components and stuff that was a BMW type design. My boss even went to the extent of saying you can even look on the glass closely and you can see BMW stamping on like the sun visor. There wasn't, Ford really had something going there where they could have done something that would have outperformed, would have outtracked, and would have done 10 times better than the Mustang ever did, but they could not mess up the image of the Mustang. So they squashed it. They never proceeded with making that car better than what it was. And to be honest with you, the Thunderbird would have been a hell of a lot better looking supercar, or really like the GT500s and the GT350s than those cars themselves. You could have really done a lot with the Thunderbird to make it look even better. If you compare that type of design to the Mustang during that time, the Thunderbird was a lot better looking car. It had a wider stance, it had longer suspension travel, there was so much more potential there to even track that car. That's why a lot of guys will choose the Thunderbirds to track and make them perform, and they perform way better than the Fox Body Mustangs did, even though they consider the Thunderbird the Fox Body platform. It's never thought of as a tracking type car. But when you actually look into the performance aspect of it, that car could do way better than a Fox Body Mustang or any other Mustang of its class, even into the 90s, 96, when they stopped making it, like 97 or something like that. It would have been a phenomenal car. The other one is, like we brought up today, I showed you guys that 1987 Buick Grand National that's built off the Regal platform, and it went from 125 horse engine to like 100 and what was it, 175, and then like 245 to 255 or something to that line. I don't have the numbers exact, but that car was a sub 14-second car that even some argue was faster than the Lamborghini, what is it, Countach at the time. Some say the Grand National was the fastest car in the world at one time. The only one that was faster, argued, would have been the Lamborghini. But if you read some critics' write-ups on it, in a straight line, the Grand National was actually faster than the Countach. But there was no other car in the world made at the time. And it was just a basic junk design that was thrown together, sent off to a factory. They tried to see what they can do with it, and then they tried to make it a little better. And then they squashed it for a little bit, and then they brought it back. And then they sent 500 of them to McLaren, and the GNX was created. And it was an amazing vehicle, and it could have went further and further and further. But what does GM do? They can't taint the image of the Corvette, so they have to squash the further making of the car. And this was all around the same time where the EPA was really hampering auto manufacturers and the production of horsepower and stuff like that, creating this technology, the first era of the sequential fuel injection, things of this nature, the first vehicle. It was a V6 to make that kind of power to beat all the other V8s on the road. I think it's pretty interesting when you look at the timeline of where these cars were what could have happened and what these auto manufacturers did to control the market to squash these designs because they didn't want them to take away from the image of that iconic car. And if you look out there and you see a lot of the information that's out, like you look at like Donut Media and you look at all the other big YouTubers and stuff that talk about the timeline, like the guy that's got over 4 million subscribers, I forget his name, but he does all these like really in-depth reviews on all these cars and stuff and the history of them. You can really learn a lot from these guys because they even get into the history of, what was it, Donut Media a few years ago? Looked into when did GM like squash the design or get rid of the patent for the GNX, but then all of a sudden, was it 2018 or 2019, I was watching one of his videos and he said it's kind of weird because they recently just like refreshed that patent, almost as if they're going to try to come out with another version of that car. Just how Ford comes out with, out of nowhere, they give us the Shelby back, or the Mach 1, and then they squash it for a while, and then they bring it back, and then the Maverick, and then they bring it back, and then GM was talking about bringing back the Firebird for a while, and that's still not off the table. And then it's just now we've got the full size Bronco back and stuff like that. They keep playing with these designs over time, and they make us think that they're done, they're never going to come back. But I think honestly, it would be better for them not to bring the Grand National back, just for the fact that it proved what it had to prove at the time. And it basically put everything to bed. There was nothing else to really lay on the table. I don't know that it would be a good idea to bring that car back, but I sure would love it. I would probably try to buy one. I don't know. I just figured I'd bring this up and just kind of put some talking points on the table, and maybe you guys can share what vehicle do you remember that was squashed that you would have liked to see continue. I know I would have liked to have seen the Trans Am continue. That was an iconic car that was just phenomenal, knock out of the park at it. For its time, I love that car. I loved the WS6 package. I would have loved to have seen Chevy keep that. I would have loved to have seen Ford continue working with the Bullet platform instead of just every once in a while it pops up for a year and then it's gone. One of the things that I seen the other day that made me kind of giggly and happy is somebody traded in at our dealership like a 15 or 16 model single cab short bed Dodge Ram RT package with, I'm talking full long tube headers, full exhaust, RT rims, and it was badged right from the factory. The customer went to Dodge and ordered it from Dodge the way they wanted it. And he was like, you can still order this truck. It's like a custom order truck. It's not going to be something that you just show up and see it on the showroom floor unless somebody traded it in. I went and ordered this truck. So we have this truck at the dealership now. It's got 78,000 miles on it, and it's so hard for me not to buy this truck just because I haven't seen one of these trucks in years. I would have loved to have seen the Trans Am, the Pontiac Firebird, and these things continue, but they take these things away to control the market, and they give it back to us. And the Camaro can't be tainted. The Corvette can't be tainted. The Shelby can't be tainted. The regular Mustang, they can't taint the image of that. So, you ever think about any of that stuff?